What's going on, guys? Cody from MotorcycleMD, and Happy New Year! This is the first video of 2024, and we're not going to change anything. We're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. On this video, we'll be going back into the XL185, as we still have so much to do. I think the last video we shot on the XL185 was putting the bottom end back together, so I think this is part whatever on continuing putting the motor back together. If you are brand new and have no idea what I'm talking about, there's a whole playlist on this bike. This motor was completely lock solid. We had to unlock it, take it out, tear it down, now we're going back together. So let's pick up right where we left off and see if we can't make some more progress. Obviously we do. Enjoy. So with the cases back together, the crankshaft in, we are going to work on this oil pump. We have a few things to put back into both sides of this motor before we can progress. So this is just the oil pump, basic pump. They use these in so many different things, and I like to clean them off in some good acetone. Most of the parts, actually all of the parts that went into this was clean in acetone. Super easy. It's freezing cold on your hands, but it works awesome. Use a little razor blade to get some of that excess gasket off on both sides. There's a little tracheoid oil pump right there. Trying to cut your finger off, obviously, but I did see some markings on this, some wear that I just wanted to spend a little time with. Wet sandpaper works great. You don't want to take too much material off. We're just trying to make a smooth surface, and honestly, it probably doesn't matter too much, but you can see the difference of when I'm done, how much better it looks, like that. It just had some small wear on it, nothing crazy. I found the same thing on that round part over that I'm holding now that I try to work on a little bit, but that metal was a lot harder, and it didn't work too well, but it did show some signs of improvement. Again, we're not trying to make a brand new surface on these. These are probably just totally fine. That's the side I did not sand right there. Again, just use some acetone and just kind of sand it all down. But let's put this thing back together with some fresh oil, some zinc compound inside of that assembly lube. Here's the gasket. This top cover does get oriented in a specific way, so just pay attention to that. We're going to screw it back in and lock it in as hard as we can without stripping it and put this thing back together. First goes the center little pinion that spins the gear and spins the pump itself, and the cover can go on, and we bring the cases back into the picture. New O-rings for where that oil pump's going to live. We're going to oil those down. Go ahead and install that how it should be. We can drive the screws for it right through that gear. There's some openings for it. Just lock that in, as well as the two outer bolts that hold the cover on. Also off screen, this is my cleaning pail. Acetone in it. You can see why I clean every part. That's just from the parts we put in there in this video. Not including the camshaft and stuff, but it's a lot of sediment and debris that you don't want to end up in your oil. That's why I hand clean every single part with a brass brush and some acetone. Works pretty good. Some parts back from a friend of mine who vapor honed this stuff for me. If you guys remember what this looked like before, it was pretty bad. But this is totally reusable. The gears look great. There's no teeth marks in the side of these fins, and we are ready to install them. We got some factory Honda steel plates, and we went with a Vezra clutch disc set. Save a couple bucks. Got some new cam chain as well. So we'll get these soaking in oil and get these cleaned up and start putting this thing back together. I had some brand new assembly lube. I really like this Permatex Ultra Slick stuff. I also like the other stuff I'm using, but this stuff doesn't smell. I don't really care what you use. You can use engine oil. We're just going to put this on a couple different ways. Does not matter which way it goes on. Sometimes there'll be a mark on these things. Not this one. This is going to drive the oil pump as well as the back side of the clutch hub. And this actually has some wear marks on it from when it was installed before, so I'm just going to put it back in that same way. Just for reference, see the shiniest part? That's where the gear has been riding for the hub. This back section. And then the oil pump is up front. And because it's splined, I like to put a little molly on it. It's a little overkill. Now we have our clutch hub right here. We want to make sure this is nice and lubed up as well. I will put some moly on the inside of this guy, as well as the back surface that it contacts on that bearing race, and that will live there. Then we have our thrust washer. Looks like this. We have a rounded side and a flat side. The manual does not dictate which way this goes, so we're just going to throw the flat side against the back like that, and we'll put some moly on where it's going to live, and on the front plate of it as well. Alright, that will go against this resting face right here. We just put a little, we already have some moly on the back end of it. Before I put these steel plates on, what I like to do is grab some acetone, and we'll just clean these off. We want to let these things get the oil on them as good as possible. Yeah, these really aren't that bad. That's a pretty clean. And this guy will go in first. Thrust washer goes right in the center, as you can see that. So I can't tilt this thing back a little bit. And we want to start and end with friction plate. So we'll start with friction plate. Steel disc, I'm going to throw this flat side facing out. And we're going to try our best to line these up, but it's going to be off. And you just go back and forth, friction, steel. Now, it's easier if we have a little bit of momentum of this thing being upside down, but I'm going to see if we can't send this thing all the way in. It might even be easier just to make it as a pack. Yeah, let's just do that. How about we just do that? I'll be here for hours. We're just going to locate all these steels. That way we know that it's in, and we'll worry about lining these things up instead. Boom. Sweet. We have our washer that goes on. It says outside, so that means face that outside section towards the outside. There's a bunch of different ways. I mean, there's two ways you can put this bolt. There's a rounded edge and a flat edge, and I personally have seen it done on brand new bikes. Old bikes have never been touched with the flat side facing out, with this rounded side facing more in. And I'm not sure, someone who with an engineering degree might know more than me, but I'm going to go with the rounded side facing in. In theory, my brain says that this is going to push on that beveled outside washer first and allow that washer to flatten out. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's going to stay. Ain't going nowhere. When it comes to the springs, I did buy brand new springs, but I haven't opened them yet. And I'm a little curious if they are still within spec. The service limit on it is 32.5 millimeters of spring free length. You can find that in any manual for your bike. We got 4 springs, and we can measure that. Yeah, 32.5. So just barely touching the spring. We're at 35.2. I do want these all to be pretty similar. 35.2, same. So we're going to keep the old ones. And I'll get my money back for the new ones. Use the same bolts that came out of them. They don't look stretched or damaged at all. Oops. Make sure that all the springs are sitting down inside of their little spot on this front plate. Then we'll just run these all in as evenly as possible. Those get a very low amount of torque, like 7 foot-pounds or something. It's probably inch-pounds, honestly. So for now, we'll torque these later. Again, it's not a lot. I probably won't even use a torque wrench, to be honest with you. But we'll leave the bearing, center bearing, and the push rod out, because this will remind me to retorque that. We do have our oil filter to put on, our centrifugal sling right here. Just gonna get this all lubed up on these splines. Then we have our outside washer that goes in, and we have the same thing over here with the same kind of nut. Both of these nuts call for 28 to 36 foot-pounds, so I'm just gonna hit them right now. I'm not gonna torque them, but just so I know that they're tight. And we'll know to torque those down later. Okay, so that's in. Alright, we got our sling. We come with a new gasket. Looks like it fits, but we also got some new screws. You guys remember from that kit, that stainless kit we bought, and they all just fell out. I'm not going to tighten these down because this is going to have to come back off again when I go to torque it. Next up we got our Kickstarter stuff. Put a little bit of oil on these threads. Got our washer. Because it's splined as usual. Little molly. We have our spring. And we have our little Kickstarter cam that will go on this spindle here. And there is a mark. And the mark is actually up here on the spindle. I'll show you guys. A little alignment mark. You can see the mark there, and it's right underneath it on that spindle. Lines right up, because this can go on any way it wants. So you gotta line that up. Alright, this side's pretty much done, other than some dowels that will go here and here, and the cover and the gasket. I'm not going to put all that stuff on right now. Once we get the cylinder and that stuff on, we'll put the cover on without a gasket just to get this motor back into the frame, and then we'll just put it on the bench, and then we'll start torquing everything down and tightening everything up. It's just the way that I do it. Alright, so now we're just prepping for the cam chain tensioner, the guide, and the new chain. We are putting new gears top and bottom, so I'm going to run a new chain. Got this from Hot Cam. They make a lot of chains for a lot of different stuff. I trust the company. I'm just cleaning off all of the oil or whatever they have on the chain right now with some acetone. And I'm going to put my own oil on it. I just use the same oil that we used on the clutch plates in the bag. Get that oil all soaked into those rivets. Cleaned up the tensioner system. This guide is fine. I'm happy with it. It's not something that's going to snap. There's a little bit of wear on it, but we're going to run that. I'm not worried about it. This looks identical, both top and bottom. I think I went something like that. It's going to go up through this chute here. Alright, so we can slip our chain down. There are a few parts to put into this, so we need some oil on our fingers so we can just lube up some of these random parts like our tensioner rod right here. But this piece is going to feed into these two kind of odd parts. These two little ramps right here, they're going to stack on top of each other to make a cylinder. Like that. But this is going to take place then through this tensioner hole here. So I'm just going to lube these up right here. And then we're going to try to drop these down in there and get them lined up. Kind of like that. And they'll kind of find themselves. It's going to go through this hole right here. Sweet. This guy with an O-ring. Going to slip down and thread into the case. And you can see that once this is loose, this bottom section, this has free movement to take up slack where it needs to. So this is going to be like locked in like this. And this can move up or down given another actuator arm. But once this is locked in, it no longer can move. Those two little ramp pieces, they tighten in on each other and it locks onto that shaft. And this arm is what rides up underneath the chain. And this is what pushes up on here. So we'll leave this nice and loose for now. We have a spring that will attach under here, and that adds the spring tension for it to go up. If you want to put a little thread locker, you can on this. I'll probably put some blue, something kind of lightweight. No red, it's a little unnecessary. This will be a little bit tricky to do. Alright. Underneath our chain. Nice and tight. I don't think it's going to rub on the chain, but we'll look at it once we get this thing rotating. We can bend that little arm down if it is touching the chain at all. Now you can see we have our spring here, back in the back, held on to the bottom of the arm, and this can pivot Obviously it's not going to be run like this. Once tension is found, you would tighten this top one up, and then it would hold that in place, in theory. We have our guide, but I believe this is going to go in after the cylinder. That's going to sit right into that pocket down there. Alright, let's go ahead and get this piston and pin all signed up. You ready? I'm actually not even sure what brand piston this is. This came with the new cylinder that I got. That's not a brand box. Probably Vertec or something like that. But the rings look good. I'm thinking they're probably like Ripken or Ripken, whatever that brand is. There's an R on both of them, but it's whatever. This is a slightly overbore piston. So I can't clean this thing up real quick. You guys remember the old piston? Pretty gnarly. We just need to know which way is the intake, which is the IN. Got our wrist pin, or pin boss, or whatever. We'll do the same with this, get any type of anti-rust compound off of it. I'm going to go ahead and throw a circlip in on one side. Intake is on the back side of the cylinder. Let's work from this side. Let's go ahead and oil this up. I'm going to oil these lands up as well. We have our oil scraper ring here at the bottom. This has little journals on the back side that goes on the inboard side that the rings will sit on top of once this is all together. It'll make like a little cake. These rings, sometimes they don't have indicators, but one thing that I learned was like when you apply a little bit of pressure, they'll bend a certain way. Like no matter what way I flip this, it's going to bend a certain way. So when this is when it's sitting on the piston and it's moving up and down, the goal of the oil scraper ring is to keep oil here and downward. We don't want oil to come past up through it. Not that I really don't think it's going to make that big of a difference no matter which orientation we do it. It's just a theory that I've kind of gone off and I was taught that when we're scraping downward down the cylinder, we want it to scrape the oil on its way down. I'm going to put this in this way. I'm sorry. This way, downward. So this will help scrape the oil downward. That's just my theory. You know, honestly, it could be wrong. It's just something that I was taught and I've always stuck to and I've never had a problem with. So because of that evidence, well, that's what we're going to do. Oil scraper journal right here. These will go end to end. They will not hook onto each other. So just end to end. I like to kind of start with one end in. I mean, kind of wrap this around like so. And then we'll just offset it. So this one's over here, off to the right of this pin. So we'll just offset this one. Just kind of roll that thing on there like that. Spin this around to the other side, and we'll work this in to that oil we gave it. Next one is our secondary ring. This one's a lot thicker. There should be a print on it, some type of stamp. It has an R. So I'm just going to work this down. Try to work towards getting one end of it over. The least amount of bend you can give it, the better. Okay, and actually in the book they'll tell you how to orient these. They kind of want this one, they just want them not all stacked. All these gaps, they don't want them all stacked on top of each other. So I just put one on this side and then we'll put the top ring over on this side. And you can kind of take this has a mark on it. It does. So we'll just drop that one end in. I'll just push it around like this. There we go. Use some engine oil. Nice and lubricated. The oilier, the better. So we'll just throw this one around the other side. We got one gap over here, one gap over here, one gap over here, one gap over here. Okay? So intake is going to be on the backhand side. So we can go ahead and get this down and get our pin ready. Feed that down. Find the crankshaft. Push that all the way in. Now let's go ahead and grab some rags. So I would enjoy not dropping a circlip down in here. And we'll go ahead and just press this circlip in. You never want to reuse a circlip, ever. That feels like it's in. Sweet. Go ahead and grab our gasket. It's okay if this gets oily. I'm not going to put any silicone on it. Sweet. Our oil passage is free on the other side. It's not being blocked. The thread mark on this is a little off. It is what it is. we should be able to get through that. Cylinder nice and oiled up, nice hone on it. Gasket, dowel pin, circlips, rings oriented in the intake side, facing the right direction. I'm just going to feed this on, and there's a little bit of a taper on the bottom of these pistons. You can just kind of feed it in with your fingernails. You can use popsicle sticks, you can use a cylinder or a piston ring compressor tool. I just don't need one. So we can start with this top ring and just take your time. I like to let the weight of the cylinder kind of do its own thing. There's one. I'm gonna work the piston back and forth. It's really hard with this camera in the way. Sorry, I'm gonna block your view. This should all be pretty much in there. Yeah, none of them are hanging out. Just rocking the piston back and forth. And down we go. Prepare our chain. It's okay if it drops in there, honestly. This gasket's not perfect. There's also a little bit of paint on those dowel pins, but we're okay. Chain guide's gonna go right in. There's a little cutout for it back here. Facing the right direction. Boom, that's in. And next is the head. Alright, I think we'll stop it there. I was debating on just keeping this thing going and putting the entire motor back together, but let's split it up because there's always some things I want to talk about and share about. Next week we'll be putting the head back together, the valves, the springs, and timing the motor and setting the valves and blah 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 blah, as well as putting it back in the frame. If you enjoyed this content, again, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thank you guys for just spending the time on this channel. I'm really looking forward to this next year and what all we can accomplish. We have a bunch of bikes to wrap up, and I'm hoping that you stick along with me as we do it. See you guys next time. Cody from MotorcycleMD, bringing you guys some quality tips and tricks for your next build or your daily rider. Happy New Year. Later.